Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's the Rockman Complete Works Collection Mega Man 3 edition for the PlayStation 1, brought to us by Capcom. The Rockman Complete Works collection of games was released individually for each of the Mega Mans 1 through 6 for the PlayStation 1 in 1999 in Japan, though it has seen a release on the North American PlayStation 3 via the PlayStation Network, as well as there was a compilation with all 6 games in one. In these Complete Works versions of the games, you have the original game, a gallery mode, and then you have a mode that basically works kind of like a hint mode. You have some hints along the way, get like some pointers on what to do in the game, as well as the health bars and item bars for the Robot Masters and Mega Man themselves are changed up to better resemble the way they looked in Mega Man 8. Like we've done with the previous versions so far, we're going to be completing the original Rockman 3 version that is included. It's basically the same game, just of course you had an autosave, you didn't have to worry about passwords and the like. But other than that, it's like playing the classic Mega Man 3 or Rockman 3. As we begin the game, I'm going to start off by going at Snake Man first, which is how I've always gone about it. It may not be always the first choice everyone has. Top Man is technically the easiest if you want to just use Mega Buster on him, and that's usually who I go after second. But Snake Man is another relatively easy Robot Master to take on in Mega Man 3. While Mega Man 2 I still think is the definitive of the classic Mega Man games, and I like 4 and 6 a lot of people in recent years have considered Mega Man 3 the overall best of the bunch. One of the reasons is not just because of the Robot Masters, the levels, and of course the music, but you have the added little thing of getting to kind of reface the Mega Man 2 Robot Masters, at least in a way. After completing the 8 Robot Master levels, you then have to revisit 4 of them, in which case you have to, while going through, battle 2 bosses in each of them, and it's basically a robot that takes the form or power of the Mega Man 2 Robot Masters. That whole addition, along with just some solid overall gameplay, makes Mega Man 3 a very popular one as far as the classic series is concerned. It also introduced us for the first time to Mega Man's brother in Proto Man. One thing you'll notice a lot throughout the course of the game, and I use this to my advantage, is I will take damage from a lot of enemies that do like minimal damage and use that to kind of run through and kind of get past bigger enemies instead of bothering to actually take them out. One creature though that I do have to take out though is these giant snake robots, staying as far away as I possibly can, doing a jump up into the air and firing at them. Sometimes if you time a couple of shots correctly, you can hit them twice with each jump, but minimally you want to land at least the one and then dodge out of the way of his projectiles. Make the big leap over here, and thankfully there's a big health replenishment up this ladder. And that's another thing too, there's a lot of these scattered throughout the levels, so running through a bunch of enemies and getting hit a little bit really doesn't end up hurting you all that bad. There's only a couple of times in the game where there isn't some sort of automatic health replenishment coming up after tough areas or taking damage from certain areas. During this segment here, we're going to ride the clouds up into the air on a few of the platforms. The cloud little robots that are flying at us are actually missiles in disguise, and if you end up hitting them, they end up, of course, blasting forward. Trying to do my best to dodge in between them here and get them to go above me, hit this last one, and then enter the boss chamber for Snake Man. Introduced in Mega Man 3 for the first time was the slide ability, which I will be, of course, using quite often throughout the game, though we don't have the charged up Mega Buster yet. That was introduced in Mega Man 4. Snake Man jumps back and forth from the left to right side of the screen and repeats back and forth, every so often dropping the search snakes onto the ground in order to try to attack you. He doesn't like stay on you or anything. No matter which side you are, he's just going to keep going back and forth left and right, and this makes him relatively easy because you have a decent amount of time when he's going to be going the opposite direction of wherever you are, so you can land in those shots. Trying to do a quick slide underneath or letting him jump over us from time to time will be essential so we don't end up getting hit quite as much. You kind of just have to pay attention to his jump cycle, where he's about to jump, and keep delivering those little shots until he's done, and we're moving on to the next Robot Master. Next up is Top Man, who is, by many regards, the worst of the robot masters in the game, but he ends up being the best in a lot of ways as well. Not only is he absurd in his overall just appearance and overall usefulness as far as a robot goes, being a spinning top, but he also has one of the most powerful moves in the game. The top spin is really hard to pull off and really hard to master as far as using it and not getting hurt while also using it, which I've never been really good at. I always end up getting hit by whatever I try to use it on. But it actually ends up being the weakness for some of the hardest or late game bosses. In fact, the final form of the final boss of the game is wiped out easily by Top Man's top spin attack. So he's really important, even though he's kind of laughable. Here we have to deal with the Matools. These Mets have a little bit of different appearance and design as far as what they end up doing in this game compared to what they did in Mega Man 2. When they end up popping out and firing at you, they will then actually run towards you. When we drop down here, we have this giant cat who spits out yarn balls. His back can also open up and throw out little flea robots that you may have to deal with as well. Here we're going to take out this top robot by just jumping little jumps into the air, hitting the things as he's throwing them at us, and then we go right into the second fight here against the cat robot. Now here, the yarn balls won't bounce back at you since they go off screen, and once they do go off screen though, that's when he's going to fire out those flea robots. Once he's done though, if we've taken some damage throughout the course of the level, we get a nice big health replenishment. Just have to be careful that the Matool doesn't end up knocking us down into those spikes. Watching out, if possible, from another spinning attack from this big guy. Thankfully, he drops a little tiny bit of health. And now we have these spinning, rotating top platforms. The only real thing about them is you want to be careful when you jump off of them that you're near the right side so that you have enough space for you to be able to make it to the other platforms. Now, Top Man, we don't have his weakness here, so we're just going to be using the Mega Buster, which actually really works as a great weakness against him. You can see how much damage it does. Top Man throws out 3 tops that then, after they kind of spin for a few moments, will then come hurling towards you, easily able to be dodged by just sliding out of the way or even walking out of the way sometimes from him. He'll then stand in place and spin and then dash across the screen, easily able to be jumped over, and then continue firing shots. You can't hurt him while he's doing his little spin move. Once he's done though, we're moving on to the next Robot Master. Next up is Shadow Man, who has the really cool looking waterfall in the background. Is it lava? Is it blood going on in the background? Either way, we're going to land down below here and watch out for a couple of robots. These Matools riding these like construction vehicles, you have to hit them, of course, in their face in order to do damage. 3 shots and they're done, and then we drop down here for the first fight that we're facing off against Proto Man. Proto Man is a very easy pattern when he's jumping back and forth. He just continually jumps and fires 2 shots every time. If you stand on the ground, he's unable to hit you with his shots. You'll just have to slide underneath of him when he comes your way. One of the great strategies is, of course, getting right behind him and just keep repeating this process and firing at him until he ends up disappearing. Once he does, the floor will open up and you'll be able to continue. In the next section, we have a couple of these walking robots, and then we are introduced to this part here with these exploding grenade robots. These guys are annoying because they end up, of course, exploding, and if you walk into that explosion, you're going to get hurt, and it does a lot of damage. In fact, it does more damage than a lot of the enemies in the game, so if you're going to get hit, just get hit by the robot themselves. Don't get hit by their explosion. It is quite deadly, that is for sure. You also have the added effect of being unable to really see that well because of the other robot up above. If you take it out, though, you'll be able to see fine, but there's no pits during this section, so it's easy to navigate through, even if you can't see directly where the platforms are. Here in this corridor, watching out for more of the jumping robots coming our way, and then we have to do a couple of jumps here, watching out for these parachuting robots that end up coming down from the sky. You can either jump continually over, or just wait for them to kind of descend a little bit, and then start doing their little back and forth floating move, and then you'll be able to easily hit them. Right after that, we then have a couple of dragonfly robots. We're going to have a bunch of those throughout the course of the game. And then we get to enter the boss chamber, which we're going to be using Top Man's top spin move. To do it, you have to jump in the air and get near the enemy and then press it in order to attack him. You don't want to hold the button down or else you'll keep spinning and keep using all the ability. So you just want to jump at him and spin when you're right on him. I'm just showcasing a little bit of what Shadow Man can do here when he throws out his throwing stars in a spread-like pattern with the two, and then he jumps a lot, and every couple of jumps he'll then slide, and then repeat the process of shooting, and then jumping and sliding. After delivering just 4 hits with the top spin though, he drops, and we're moving on to the next level. Next up, we're traveling into this electric factory and taking on Sparkman. First, by taking out the first guy, and when you get up here, you have these 2 little conductors on the top and bottom. They slide back and forth, and every so often electricity goes between them, so you want to wait for that to go through, and then jump between them. Or if you end up getting hit, you can just easily slide on through past them. Up here, watch out for this guy. You can either get hit by one of his projectiles, which is usually what I like to do. It does very little damage, and then you can just kind of go right past him. Here, you have to be very careful, because when you jump on these platforms, they rise up, and if you take too long, you'll end up going, of course, into the spiky ceiling above. Quickly jump through these, and then we're going to hit the ladder on the far right side, and have another one of those tools. You have the rush coil at your disposal at all times from the beginning of the game, allowing us to jump up to higher platforms. So if you're a little bit low on health or a little bit low on an item, use that rush coil in order to pick up that item replenishment and health replenishment that's located in that one spot, before going up here, watching out for a few robots, and dropping down several screens in a row. Be careful during this segment that you don't get dropped on by these large pieces of junk, as they do a hefty amount of damage. Once past them, you can replenish some of your items, whichever one you want to, and then you have another series of platforms that we have to jump to with these rising ones. Of course, there's a spiky ceiling, as well as these little, screw robots that come together and try to chase you down as well. They can't be hurt until they become one and start moving around. For Sparkman, we're going to be using Shadow Man's ability, which is very easy to do damage to him. He has 2 moves. He bounces around. He does a spread shot with sparks going everywhere. Easy to dodge that move. But it's difficult to dodge his second move, which is the really large, giant projectile he fires out. The hit radius on it is humongous, and it's really hard to kind of get it to go in a direction that you're able to kind of sneak around it and get around it, especially with the battlefield that you're dealing with him on. Either way, though, once he's taken care of, we're moving on to the next level. Next up is a favorite of mine in Magnet Man's level. It starts off with these magnet robots above. They kind of push you up into the air and then try to drag you along with them. But of course, quickly getting out of their reach by hitting left or right, whatever direction, or taking them out, you can, of course, get past them. You just want to be careful during a couple of those jumps there, because there are some pits that you may accidentally fall into if you're not careful. Right after that, though, we do have to deal with Proto Man for the second time around. Once again, we're going to use that same strategy of getting behind him. He just has that very simple pattern of jumping and firing the 2 shots up into the air. Thankfully, another really easy fight to deal with him. Once he's done, the floor, of course, is going to open on up, and we're going to drop on down. Right here, we have one of these big giant robots that fires missiles. These missiles, once they come out, they will chase you until they hit you. So just try to outrun them as much as possible, or you can take them out with a single shot. Sometimes I like to just see how far I can actually get them to keep going with me. Here we have this introduction of these machines that kind of pull you in towards them. Get used to how much that pressure is, because we have a section coming up with disappearing, reappearing blocks that we're going to have to deal with them. You can drop on down here and grab a little bit of health replenishment before now we go into that spot with all the disappearing, reappearing blocks that I love so much in the Mega Man series. Doing some nicely timed jumps to try to stay away from that machine is what I usually prefer to do to have the better advantage of trying to get through this section. It's not as difficult as some segments like this in the series, but it's still pretty difficult. If you mistime it, you can easily get sucked right down into a pit. Thankfully, we don't have to deal with that much at all in this game, though. In fact, that's the only segment like that in the whole game. So, now we just continue on, and we just have to deal with all the other hazards that Mega Man games include. At the top here, before we get to the boss door, we have another one of the giant robots firing missiles. Easily take him out, and now we're entering the battle here, and we're going to be using the Spark Man ability that we just gathered in the last level in order to take out Magnet Man. Magnet Man has two moves. He will either stand still and either cause like this reaction around him that will try to pull you towards him to do damage, or he will fire out a series of magnet missiles that will go across the ceiling, dropping down wherever you're located. Either way, you can't hit him when he's doing that like move to pull you in towards him, but when he's not, just hit him with a couple of sparks and he easily drops. We have 3 robot masters left to deal with, and the first of those 3 we're dealing with is Hardman. Of course, one of the funniest names, because, yeah, of course, Hardman. But he has an interesting level overall, starting off with these bees that get dropped. These honeycombs get dropped and explode into a series of bees. Never been a big fan of this. Thankfully, though, they're easy to take out with a single shot, but there is, of course, 5 of them chasing you at a given time. Thankfully, this version holds up pretty well as far as the bees chasing you and not slowing down the game, and the good thing is there's a health replenishment, so even if you get hit a bunch by the bees, you can grab that before heading up the ladder. Here we're going to have to use Rush Coil in order to get past this spot by climbing up. You can take them out if you want to, or you can just do what I do and take some damage and continue on. Then we have these monkeys introduced that when you get close, they jump up to the ceiling, and then when you get really close, they drop on down. They're pretty fast, but a lot of times I try to just outslide them and get away from them because, once again, we have another health replenishment waiting for us after we climb up the ladder. We have to deal with this guy, which I will take out, and with that, I have full health again, even after getting hit a few times by those monkey guys. Here's another one here, but if I time it just right, I can get past him and easily get the ladder, and I don't even have to deal with him. At the top portion, we're going to slide underneath, deal with one of the construction tools, take that out, and then continue sliding on until we run into the next one. Now here you can go up if you want to get an energy tank, or you can just slide underneath and continue all the way to the right side. If you go up that way, you'll have to deal with another tool, but either way, it's pretty easy paths, either one you end up choosing. The energy tanks are, of course, very useful, and I will be gathering a couple during the course of the run. Dropping down here, we have to deal with another Proto Man battle. This time is a little bit more difficult to deal with because of the uneven playing field that you have to deal with him on. It, of course, continues the same pattern of jumping back and forth, and you can still easily get underneath of them if you time it correctly. It's just a little bit more difficult than the other ones because it's not a flat surface you're battling him on. Once he's done, though, the floor opens up in the center, and you get dropped on down for more health replenishment. It's really difficult, though, warrant fighting many things in this level because there's plenty of health laying around. After dodging a giant robot by easily sliding underneath of him, we're going to equip our Magnet Man ability and go into Hardman's level. Now for Hardman, he fires out his giant hard knuckle fist at you, in which case they will fly out and then kind of retract back towards you wherever you are. And when he makes a big jump, he will end up causing a little bit of an earthquake, allowing him to have a little bit easier time hitting you. But a few magnets, and he's done, and we have the next Robot Master to take care of. Moving on to another one of the stranger levels in the game, in Gemini Man's level. It starts off with these robots that fly overhead and drop fire on down. These little columns of fire you can get between, or you can try to take out the robots with a nicely timed shot before he's able to drop the fire on you. There's also penguins throughout this area that will throw out eggs, spit eggs out at you. I think these penguin robots are one of the cooler enemies in the game for sure. You just want to be careful that you don't end up getting knocked back by any of these robots into one of the pits. A relatively easy, straightforward area, but pretty lengthy, considering there's not really many areas like this in the game. When you make it over here, Proto Man ends up showing up to opening up this big contraption so that you can go down into the area below. Now, once down here, you have the big kind of gimmick here with Gemini Man stage. These, like, weird eggs that hatch like tadpoles. You hit them, sometimes they have one of the things spawn from them, other times they don't. They can easily gang up on you if you're not careful, so try to do your best to try to avoid getting hit by them or letting them at least bunch up on you and keep firing on through. Sometimes you have to make kind of your own path through them in order to reach other platforms or areas. Like here, we have to take care of a bunch of them so we can get to the ladder on the left side. While taking them out, they will drop items, including extra lives, item replenishment, and health, so you can get some of that refilled. Here we're going to have to use the rush coil so that we're able to get up high enough in order to reach the platform above. In the PlayStation versions of the Mega Man Rockman Complete Works, one of the coolest things is the fact you can switch weapons instantly using the L1 and the R1 buttons. It's something that we would also see in the later Mega Man collections that we would see on like PlayStation 2 and Xbox and all, but this was the first version of that to actually include that, which is actually really cool. These giant penguin robots are awesome, don't get me wrong, but easily getting hit and sliding through them will take a heck of a lot less time and potentially save you health because there's a lot going on there. And right afterwards, as you may have guessed it by now, a big giant health replenishment right after that whole segment. Now here we're going to get to use the Rush Marine for the first time. This is the submarine version, of course, of Rush, and we're going to use this to work our way through the water. Of course, you can easily go through the platforms as well, but you have to be careful not to get knocked down into the very vast open pit area below. Be sure, though, to pick up the giant item replenishments during this part, though, so that you don't end up running out and untransforming from the Rush Marine during the course of this segment. I always end up taking a bunch of damage as the shots from the Rush Marine are a little bit difficult sometimes to pull off. Either way, though, there is an energy tank waiting for you, so you can grab that. Plus, we got one underwater, so we can replenish some of our health, if need be, before we enter into the Gemini Man battle. Gemini Man is one of the tougher ones to kind of get used to dodging. His weakness is the Cert Snake, which I accidentally go into the boss using the Hardman ability, and then quickly remembered, oh, I have to switch here. Because I had not hit the L1 or R1 button enough. Either way, we're going to fire the Cert Snakes at him and kind of get close to the right side where he's jumping, and this way we can kind of avoid the shot, because basically when you fire, he fires. And this way we're able to dodge the shot and him, deliver a hit with the Cert Snake, and once the clone's taken out, it's an easier fight of him just kind of coming towards us and trying to take us out that way, and quickly, with a few more snakes, he's dropped, and we have one more Robot Master to tackle before we get to do the revisits. Needleman's level is up next. It starts off with these spiky guys that will spray out a spread shot of spikes and needles everywhere, and then turn into a ball and roll. Usually by the time I've hit them enough in order to actually take them out, they've started rolling at me, so I usually just end up jumping over them at that point. Here you have a couple of different paths to take. I'm just going to hit the top one here, and pretty much just run straight up into some of these cannons, though if you end up equipping the hard knuckle, you can take them out pretty easily with it. I'm just pretty careless when it comes to my health, especially at this part of the game. There's also the dragonflies during this segment. Try to do my best to jump and avoid them, as well as dealing with a few matools, hoping that a few of them drop health after I was as careless as I was during that beginning segment. Watch out for a few more dragonflies before dropping down this ladder, and now you're introduced to these big giant metal spikes that are coming out of the ceiling. Thankfully, the slide allows you to easily get past them with enough time so you don't end up getting impaled. Watch out for this one here so you don't get knocked back into a pit, and then climb up the next ladder, where you can, if you want to, use the rush coil in order to get an energy tank in the upper right corner. Here we have a couple of these guys that I'm just going to end up getting hit by their projectiles, and this way I can just kind of run on past. Here, wait for the right timing for the robot to jump up into the air. You can easily slide underneath them and enter into the boss chamber for Needleman. Now, Needleman's weakness is the Gemini laser, which I accidentally did not have equipped at the very beginning, but you can see it does a lot of damage. Gemini laser does end up eating quite a bit of energy every time you use it, so you don't get a ton of energy shots with the Gemini laser, so keep that in mind, as we have other enemies that we have to deal with it later with. But once he drops, we now get to do the revisiting for 4 of the levels in the game, where we get those rematches against the Mega Man 2 Robot Masters. You can do these in any order, as the weaknesses that you've gained throughout the course of the game all are already in our inventory of weapons, so you can go into whichever one you prefer. I'm going to start off with Sparkman here, starting off by using the rush coil in order to jump up here. Right on the next screen, though, be sure to switch over to the Gemini laser. There's maybe 1 or 2 other weapons that can hit the little guy on the ladder, but he's one of the most annoying enemies in the game, because if you don't have the laser ready, there's no way to easily get past him. In fact, you'll just run into him and get knocked right down onto the screen below, and then repeat the process until eventually you're able to take him out. Be careful of these robots here, and you can jump on these small rotating platforms in order to get your way up. Here, jump across them. Pretty easy to do so, but since you are being pushed or pulled, you may accidentally end up falling into a pit. The Gemini laser works really well against these giant robots, the giant missile-shooting robots. Just 2 of them will end up dropping them. When we enter into the boss chambers, though, we start off the rematches, and the first one we're going to be dealing with is a rematch against Metal Man, and we're going to be using the Magnet ability against him. These fights, if you've played Mega Man 2, they're pretty much identical. He's going to, of course, stay on the right side here and fire out the giant metal blades at us, easily able to hit him with a bunch of the magnets, since the magnets, when they get to him, will end up going right up into him, doing enough damage and taking him out. Right after that, we get a health replenishment, and then we're going to slide through and have to dodge in between a series of spikes, which of course are going to be instant kill. We actually end up clipping them and then drop on down. During this segment here, watch out for the rotating gear screw-like robots that end up coming at you. When they end up forming, there's also be little conductor guys on the tops and bottoms firing out electricity between them, so time it right so you can try to get past without getting shocked. Now, when we make it over to this section here, we're going to watch out for the giant junk piles that are coming out of the machine like we did earlier. You don't want to get squashed by these. And then after the end, it's time for the next boss here, is the rematch against Quickman. We're going to use the Gemini laser to take this guy out, which we have just enough to beat him. If for some reason you run out, you'll have to switch over to the Mega Buster to finish up the job. Of course, he's going to be fast. He fires up the quick boomerang that will come out towards you, and then after a few moments will then continue towards you. So basically, it's a 2-step process with them. We're going to fire that Gemini laser. Thankfully, it bounces off the walls, and with him bouncing all around as well, usually the laser will eventually end up making contact with them. Once we defeat him, though, we're moving on to the next stage. Next up, we're going to revisit Needleman's level here. It starts off with more of those big, giant guys with the needles, firing out a couple before rolling into a ball. This allows us, of course, to easily jump over them so that we can continue on. Watch out for the spike pit located here before dropping on down, and then you have a bunch of big giant needles again. Here we're going to, of course, slide underneath of them, and then you have to kind of time it just right, because you get a very limited amount of time in order to sneak by the ones that come out of both the ground and the ceiling at the same time. Over here to the right, use the rush coil to spring up. You can also spring up if you want to gather a little bit of extra health if you ended up taking a few hits during the early part of the level. We're going to use the GEMINI laser in order to take out the giant guy here, and then switch back off to the rush coil to bounce up to the ladder. Do the same here. You could use the rush jet if you wanted to in order to get over to that right side and grab that energy tank. But when you make it to the top, watch out for one more guy before we end up getting into the first of the boss rooms here. And here, the first one we have to deal with is Airman. Now for Airman, we're going to use Magnet Man's ability in order to hit him, and we're going to dodge in between the tornadoes. Thankfully, we have the slide, something that we wouldn't have had in Mega Man 2, and this allows us to kind of slide underneath some of the tornadoes as he's firing them out. After a few of them, he'll then bounce across the room to the opposite side and repeat the process. When you make it here, be sure to have a full set of the Rush Jet. We're going to be using that in order to navigate through the next part here. Summon the Rush Jet, and you can control this while riding and hitting up and down in order to move it around so that you're able to get past all the enemies. You can fire at them a bit if you want to. Our main goal is to try to dodge them and be able to pick up all of the item replenishment while avoiding taking damage during this segment. When you make it over to this segment here, I'm going to switch out real quick and then switch right back into it, and this is an easier way to make sure I get that item replenishment, then resummon the Rush Jet to continue on my way. As I continue on, watching out for a few more enemies, eventually I make it over to this ladder. After climbing up, I will need to use the Rush Jet again in order to make it to the next ladder. I assume you also could use Rush Coil here, and you barely would be able to clip onto that ladder. So either way, if you're like really low on the Rush Jet or whatever, you could probably use the Rush Coil to get up there as well. Then we have to battle these giant Matools that pop out of the ground. The GEMINI laser works really well against them, along with the hard knuckle move as well, which does a lot of damage to them. You have to deal with 2 of them during the segment. I'm going to switch over to hard knuckle and use that in order to finish off a couple of these giant cannons, which this works really well on. Then use the hard knuckle again in order to take out the giant Matool. You have to hit the cross on its head in order to actually do damage, but once he's done, go over here and watch out for another one of the little needle guys and grab a big health replenishment before we enter the boss chamber. Now, for this boss, we're going to be battling against Crashman, or Clashman, and here we're going to use that hard knuckle in order to do this. He ends up jumping when we fire, and because of this, we can time the hard knuckle just right in order to hit him as he's jumping back and forth, firing out those crash bombs every once in a while. It doesn't take many of them. Thankfully, we had enough, and he drops, and now we're going to move on to the revisiting of Gemini Man's level. The beginning of the level is very similar to the first time we visited Gemini Man stage, except you have the ant bug-like guys that move across the ground instead of having the penguins to deal with, but you still have the other guys floating overhead trying to drop the fire bits down on you. Easily able to get between them or fire at them from a distance just to prevent them from being able to fire multiple fire out at a row. After the relatively lengthy segment again, we're going to drop on down into this segment where we now have a bunch more of the egg tadpole-like things that end up appearing as we break through a series of these eggs. Be careful though when going through that you leave enough that you can stand on and get over the spiky pit located here. Once those are done, slide on through and go down the next ladder where you can kind of have a series of more firing shots against more tadpole things and eggs. When you make it to the end of that segment, jump on up. You can use them as a platform. If for some reason you destroyed all of them, you could of course use a rust coil, kind of get through, and then we're going to go through another set located here before making it to the first boss chamber. First up is the rematch against Flashman, which is a bit of a pain for sure. Going to go ahead and use Gemini Man's Gemini Laser to help us out, as it will do a significant amount of damage. This fight has always driven me insane if you're trying to do it without using the special weaknesses. If you're trying to do it just with the Mega Buster, trying to jump over him in order to clear him, not to get hit by his body, which will do a lot of damage, is very, very difficult to do. But the Gemini Laser really ends up mopping the floor with him. Once that part is done, we move on to the second segment here of the level, where we will once again use the Rush Marine to help us go through this underwater part. Just like before, we're going to jump out of the water from time to time in order to pick up the big item replenishment so that we don't end up running out, while also avoiding the robots. Then, at the end, of course, slide on through. Go all the way to the right first so you can avoid these things as they're dropping pretty much their entire body down on you, and then you can easily make it to the ladder. After that, you have a series of little ladder platforms with the little ant robot guys trying to crawl at you. Either way, get past all of those and drop down the next ladder here and head inside the door for this second boss fight of the Gemini Man Revisited. Here we're going to use Shadow Man's ability as we battle Bubble Man. Bubble Man, of course, will fire at us, will jump and float down. Don't jump too high up into the air, you'll accidentally hit the spike ceiling, which will cause, of course, an instant death. He fires out normal straight projectile shots and, of course, the bubbles that bounce all around. Either way, we're going to use those spiky shards of star power from Shadow Man in order to destroy him. Once he's done, we have one more level to revisit before we end up heading into Dr. Wily's castle area, and that is our revisiting of Shadow Man stage. As we begin Shadow Man's level, we're going to start off by dropping down between these spikes. You have to be very careful, of course, during this segment, because you can easily clip the sides and end up getting an instant death. Climb all the way down the ladder, don't try to drop off of it. If you try to speed things up, you'll just end up clipping the spikes and dying that way. Then we're going to slide underneath the giant robot before heading on down to this segment here. A bunch of these like robots that we're going to easily take out as we jump up the series of platforms, where we then have this fun segment. You have these platforms that open up when you land on them, and you have to be very quick to make sure that you don't accidentally end up falling right down into the pit. You have about a quarter of a second or so in order to stand on them before you end up having to jump, and it's a bit tricky for sure. You can easily end up hitting something and end up falling, or if you're just a microsecond off, you will end up falling into the pit. After that segment, though, there is a couple of more enemies before we enter into the first of the two boss chambers for Shadow Man's Revisited. We're going to use the Search Snake ability in order to help us battle Woodman. Of course, he's going to have that leaf shield around him and fire it at us with the leaves raining down from the top. Try to stand in between the leaves so that we don't get hit by them and deliver a couple of the snakes. It can be difficult, of course, to dodge both the leaf shield and get in between all of the leaves themselves, and it'll take a handful of snakes in order to finish him off. He does a lot of damage if he runs into you, so be careful of that. Thankfully, there is health right after that room, though. Like I've been doing for most of the game, we're going to get hit by these guys and just keep on sliding through. We're making it to this segment here with more of the parachuting guys, like we had to deal with the first time we visited this stage. Just wait for them to kind of fall down, and you can take them out from a distance using the Mega Buster before attempting to jump to the platforms. Here, use Gemini Laser if you want to take out the giant robot, and then enter into the second boss chamber. For the final of the rematches against the Mega Man 2 Robot Masters, we're going to equip Top Man's move and use this against Heat Man. Now, this is one of the times I end up using one of the energy tanks, because I don't have a whole lot of health going in, and hitting him with this can be difficult. You can see it does a ton of damage, but it also hurts you a lot. So just to be safe, I will use Top Man's ability and just use an energy tank to make sure that I stay alive. And now it's time to head to the final kind of match against the Proto Man of the game, or in this case, now he's called Breakman. Either way, this battle is identical pretty much to the ones we've been dealing with before. The only difference is you have a little bit of a different playing field to battle him, though. He's just going to do the jumps into the air, firing the 2 shots. We can easily slide underneath of him as he's jumping and get behind him and delivering shots that way. It's just this fight. That's all there is to this level, and after you do defeat him, you move on to the first of the Dr. Wily castle stages. The first Dr. Wily stage starts off like a pretty typical first stage for Dr. Wily, as we're outside of like the castle area, taking out a couple of these big guys and throwing out the little tiny tops at us that we were first introduced to in Top Man's level. Of course, there's an easy to grab energy tank that I end up missing, but if you want to grab it, of course, that's pretty easy to do so. Now this segment, of course, underwater, you could use the Rush Marine to get through it if you want, but it's a relatively easy stage area of the stage. Even with the penguins kind of floating through the water, you can usually get by pretty quickly. Up here, we're going to just avoid the breakable walls. You can destroy them if you want and grab a bunch of extra items here throughout, get some health and all that. But we should be okay. We don't really need that in order to battle the boss. The boss is a pretty easy one for the first of the Dr. Wily castle levels. Another big hallway with a bunch of these guys, just doing what I've been doing the whole time and end up getting hit by them. Here, a little bit of a trick. I'm going to get hit by one and then bounce off of the rush jet and then get up that way. That way I still don't have to worry about taking them out, because look, right here, by using the disappearing, reappearing blocks, just a little bit of them, very easy to spot, but double health replenishments right before the boss chamber. Make sure you have a full hard knuckle before going into the boss chamber here. Now, each of the Dr. Wily bosses have multiple moves that end up helping you a little bit, but the hard knuckle is an instant kill on these turtles, and that's what you're trying to do. Basically, as soon as one of the turtles spawns, you want to have a hard knuckle out and have him run directly into them. After you destroy just a few of them, the battle is over, and you're moving on to Dr. Wily Stage 2. Dr. Wily Stage 2 starts off with a couple of these retractable platforms that we saw earlier on in the game. Easy to jump up, and I'm going to take the left ladder here. Either way is good. The right one, of course, will not net you an extra life. Not that I really end up needing it, but either way ends up working. And then we're going to climb up here and do a big slide to get past all of these contraptions that try to grab you. Right after that, you do have more of those bee robots that we dealt with earlier in the game in Hardman's level. Gonna get hit a few times while going through, but it doesn't end up doing any real significant damage, and I can use them to help me get through this segment here, getting hit, and then just avoiding the spikes. That's why I don't even have to worry about doing too much. You end up getting a free energy tank while doing all of this, so once you make it to the end of the segment, use the energy tank you end up getting, and you're able to get through that area very easily, and then you're going to want to pull out the hard knuckle again. This is once again another one of the weaknesses, as we have the rematch here against the Yellow Devil from Mega Man 1. This is like Yellow Devil MK2 or something like that, but it's a very similar fight. Starts off, of course, by slowly forming with each piece being able to hit you as it's made up. The key here is, though, timing it, so you're able to hit him with 2 of the knuckles when he ends up fully forming. If you time it just right, you can hit him with 2 of those knuckles. He'll then, of course, break apart and go to the opposite side of the room, and the pieces go in the same order. However, after this time, he then does a little bit of a different pattern as far as breaking apart and then reforming. Either way, time it just right so we can hit him with 2 of the knuckles, and then wait for him to bounce his way across. This is a little bit difficult to dodge. The hitbox is quite large on those pieces. But as soon as he forms, hit him with 2 more, and the battle is over, and we're moving on to Dr. Wily Stage 3. As the level begins, we're going to switch off to the Rush Coil and use that in between the shots from this top above and bounce up, and then use it again here in order to get up to the top platform and then jump up to the ladder. Here you can easily grab this energy tank. It's just waiting there for you. Nothing's going to try to stop you from grabbing it. And then you're going to bounce on up. Here we have a series of the grenades again that we've dealt with earlier in the game. These things, once again, are pretty deadly just because of the explosion effect does a lot of damage. So just try to avoid it as best as possible. Right after that, you're going to drop on down past that enemy and slide underneath a giant robot. Got 2 of them here before making it to another ladder on the far right. Once you climb up here, you have a series of platforms that are moving. You have to be careful, of course, not to accidentally get run into the spikes or miss a platform and fall down into the spikes below. This takes a little bit of timing, but easy to get on through. If you want to, you can bounce up there and try to get some of the mystery items. But for this boss, which is against the Mega Man clones, super easy. Switch to the top man, and then jump up to the very top and attack the top clone using the top man move. Normally, after the first segment, they switch up, so you're not sure which of the clones is the real one. But the real one always starts off at the very top. The one you're able to damage is always on the top first. So switch quickly to top man, jump right up there, finish him off, and the battle's over in the blink of an eye. Once that's done, grab some item replenishments from this area here, and now we have a small level before we make it to the rematches against all the Robot Masters from the game. This segment is a little bit annoying because you do have these junk robots that appear and throw the large cubes at you. Usually I just end up taking the damage, because I'm pretty confident in myself that I can defeat at least one of the Robot Masters with the health I have left, whatever that ends up being. And once I defeat a Robot Master, you end up getting one of those big, large health replenishments. So after just a couple of them, I end up having full health. When you drop down into the room, you have all the chambers at your disposal. You can decide which one you want to go to. I'm going to start off by going into the lower left corner and rematch Gemini Man, who's one of the harder ones usually for me anyway. So probably not the smartest thing to deal with him, but going to battle him with a couple of the Cert Snakes, and of course grab the large health replenishment and move on to the next one. Here we're going to make sure that we have Spark Man's ability equipped and have our rematch against Magnet Man. This time he actually uses his magnet moves against us, but after just a couple of sparks, he's dropped. The upper left corner, as we jump up towards that, we're going to make sure that we have the Gemini laser equipped before we enter the boss chamber against Needleman, using that to easily do damage to him from a distance. He throws out his needles. He also has the head spikes on top of him that he will try to spring out towards us, but we're able to easily drop him before then switching off and going to Hardman's level here, where we're going to use, of course, Magnet Man's ability in order to hit him. Unfortunately, I end up missing a few magnets during this fight, but still a pretty easy rematch here against Hardman, even with his earthquaking ability and hard knuckles flying everywhere. After that, right to the right of that, we're going to battle Top Man. Now, here, normally you use the Mega Buster, but you can also use the Needleman's ability. Either one does about the same damage. Maybe the Mega Buster does a little bit more technically, but just for the fun of it, go ahead and use Needleman's ability here. He throws out those tops, which you can easily dodge. I don't really have any pressure to dodge because they don't do a whole lot of damage, and I know I'm going to get full health right after I end up beating him. Now we're going to have Top Man's ability as we do our rematch here against Shadow Man, getting towards him and doing that spin. Once again, make sure you don't hold the button down. You need Top Man's ability throughout the rest of the game here, so we want to make sure we don't accidentally use too much of it. Though there is item replenishments at the beginning of the other levels. Here we have Sparkman, use Shadow Man's ability, of course, to hit him. Try to dodge in between the projectiles, which can be difficult. And finally, last but not least, we have one last Robot Master of the battle. Get Needleman's ability out as we battle Snake Man, the one we fought first in the game, fighting last here in the rematches. Of course, he's going to jump across the screen as the Needleman ability does destroy the small Cert Snakes that he fires out. but the needles do a significant number of damage to him. Have full health as we finish up the battle, and then move through the door in the lower right and enter into this teleporter, which takes us to the next level. Kind of weird that we don't go into some sort of boss fight right away. Instead, we actually go to another level altogether, but there is plenty of little item replenishments at the end of that stage, plus there are some here if you do need them. Mostly, we need the hard knuckle and Top Man's abilities, so as long as we have them, we are good. For the Dr. Wily machine that we have to battle, you have to wait a little bit for him to finally get on screen, because the way you hurt him is the cannon at the bottom. Damage it, we're going to use that hard knuckle from a distance with his whirling projectiles at us. It only takes a handful of the hard knuckle, though, to finish off the first form. Once that's done, it's a little bit harder to hit the second form. Surf Snake is actually his weakness, I think, but hard knuckle, as you see, does a lot of damage as well, and we can just do little jumps up into the air and time a nice hard knuckle as the top of our jump and easily destroy the Dr. Wily machine. However, it's not quite over yet, as we find out this is a fake Dr. Wily, and instead we have one more level to go against the true final boss of the game, known as Gamma, who was stolen by Dr. Wily. And make sure for this fight you have full Top Man and full Hard Man abilities, and this fight is an absolute joke of a final boss in any of the Mega Man games. One of the easiest boss fights in all of Mega Man, for sure. We're going to use the Rust Coil, get up on the top of this right platform, switch off to the hard knuckle, and then just fire that at him from this distance. Just keep firing at him, destroy his first form. When he switches to the second form, switch to the Top Man, and then jump towards him and attack, and then immediately attack again. If you time this right, you'll do the top spin in him, his whole health bar is gone, and the game is over. You can sit back and enjoy the ending to Mega Man 3. So there you have it, Mega Man 3, the PlayStation 1 version of the game. Still a very solid Mega Man game. Like I said, personally not my favorite of the series. You know, I probably have this out of the NES ones, probably 4th, as I like 2, 4, and 6 a little bit more. I don't know why, but those are the ones I've always liked a bit more. But still, I know a lot of people absolutely love Mega Man 3, and I totally get it. Some great levels and a few great robot masters throughout. I think the whole rematches against the Mega Man 2 bosses is one of the highlights of the game for sure. As the credits roll and they end up finishing up, you get, of course, your thanks for playing, you're presented by Capcom screen. And in which case, you can go back to the main menu. You've unlocked the hard mode if you want to replay it with that hard difficulty now unlocked. As well as we're then going to also check out the gallery mode real quick before we end up finishing up the video. Just like with the other Mega Man Rockman Complete Works collection, you have a full gallery mode that showcases Mega Man and some artwork. You can unlock more artwork for completing the different modes, and then you get a list of all of the enemies from the game and a little bit of a bio on them, a little bit of description. If you meet certain conditions for fighting them, you end up getting their health and their attack revealed as well, as you can see located at the bottom. Of course, obviously not being able to read Japanese, it doesn't really do an American player who doesn't know Japanese very much good at all the profiles, but still a really cool kind of little extra feature to include this, and it has every one of the enemies, all the Dr. Wily bosses from the castle, as well as all of the 8 robot masters included in the game itself. You've also probably noticed, if you've watched the other 2 videos I've done, you have a big increase. We went from like a small amount of like 30-some to like 40-some in Mega Man 2, and now 63 profiles here in Mega Man 3, as we now show all the robot masters, which I love the artwork for these guys. Just absolutely awesome artwork. Snake Man's in particular is really cool. And there you guys go. That is Rockman Complete Works Volume 3. And with that, it's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.